Hey, what's up to all my followers and subscribers? If you haven't subscribed already, please do that. You missed last week. We discussed how I solved the problem of global warming single-handedly, so you're missing good stuff. Anyways, today we are discussing the significance of certain factors that affect depression, because depression is a huge issue for many people in our country, a tough thing. So we're gonna look into some of those factors. And I recently ran some statistical tests on my variables in play, so I have some fun stuff to show y'all. Now, for the discussion, I've uploaded some of the graphs and charts I've made that go along with my statistical tests. So go to RileyRowanFinalProject.mailchimpsites.com to see those graphs that I've uploaded for you, so you can follow along. So first and foremost, the data I've been working with is from BRFSS Health, 2011, and that's what we're going to be working with. That's what I'm going off for my studies. Pretty big field, so it's pretty interesting stuff. We get a lot of results, a lot of things to look at. So I just wanted to kind of point out, if you struggle with depression, which many people do, hopefully you can apply some of today's topics, apply some of the things I'm about to tell you that I learned and discovered, and you can apply them for a little at-home self-reflection on things in life you can try to minimize or fix to help cope with depression. And of course, it's a huge problem. It's not an easy solution, but these are some things you could try and work with and see what you could get done. So yeah, let's go. So the data is from, as I said, BRFSS Health. So it was the data I worked with was from 2011, and this group they contact U.S. residents over the age of 18 via phone or landline, and they ask them a set of certain questions. Of course, there's a minimum requirement of certain questions that have to be answered, like age, sex, race, for them to accept the participants' overall results into their study, into their system. And so that's where we're with. Over 18, any gender, any race, adults in the U.S. that are residents. And so the first thing we had to go through, it's pretty interesting, before I could run all these analytics on the stats, was we had to kind of weed out the data we didn't want. So all I'm working with was the amount of times you smoke, the amount of sleep you get per night, and the variable how many days out of 30, so basically a month, would you say you struggle with depression. So they calculated sleep. They asked people out of 24 hours, how many hours do you sleep? And then for smoking, they said, do you smoke every day, some days, or never? Tallied that down. And then for depression, they just said, they listed what the definition of depression was, and then they said how many times out of 30 days, or so how many days out of 30 days do you feel that you're depressed. So it was down. So that's what I'm working with. So so I made a list of all those, and it's awesome. By the way, if you haven't gotten into coding, check it out. So I got all those variables uploaded into the R software, which is coding for stats. Super helpful. So that's what I was working with. I had to put that out there. Didn't want to forget to mention it. Anyways, so yeah, that was the method. That's what I was working with. And the first thing I checked out was I made these two graphs. You can check them out on my website. The first one shows how the amount of sleep you get relates to depression. And it's really interesting. We see that there's a dip in depression, as in less depression, for people who sleep about 6 to 12 hours a night. And then for smoking, we see that people who never smoke report much less depression than people who do smoke. Now, this is all visual. We haven't got to the analytical tests yet, but it's just something cool to look at, something easy to visualize, see, check it out. So then what we did for actually running the test is we had to update the data a little bit more. I made sleep into a categorical variable, because sleep was just a numerical variable, which means it's just numbers, 0 through 24, because it's hours of sleep. I changed into a category of recommended sleep and not recommended sleep, which is cool. Went on the CDC website, found out the recommended hours of sleep on average for people from 18 and up, and that range is from 7 to 11 hours. So we have the 7 to 11 hour range, and then anything below 7 hours or above 11 hours is not recommended. So with these variables at hand, what we had to do was run a linear model. But for my case, since I'm using a proportion for my response variable, which is depression, because I did, how many days over 30, so it's a proportion of 30. It's just easier to read, just kind of why I did it. So since that's a proportion, we had to use a general linear model, which is a GLM plot, for those who don't know. So we ran that, and then prior to running that, you have to check assumptions. So assumptions mean, it's pretty cool. Not many people know about this. You have to make sure the distribution is equal among your variables, which all in all, it's a lot of tests. Interesting stuff. Turns out our distribution wasn't equal. We log transformed the values that made the distribution equal. So all of our tests are running with the log transformed values of our three variables: depression, sleep, and tobacco. So we ran the GLM test, the general linear model, of course. We ran that test, and we found some crazy stuff. So it turns out that smoking tobacco some days compared to smoking tobacco every day there's no statistical significantly different amount of depression. So if you're just smoking tobacco every day or some day, there's no difference in the amount of depression reported. But when we checked out people who never smoke tobacco versus people who smoke tobacco every day, we got a p-value of 2 to the negative 16th power, which is super significant, meaning that people who never smoke have significantly less depression than people who do smoke. Now on to sleep, we checked out people who slept recommended hours compared to those who didn't sleep recommended hours and how that affected their depression. We got a p-value of 2 to the negative 16th power again, meaning that those who sleep the recommended hours report significantly less levels of depression than those who don't sleep the recommended hours. So, overall it shows these do play a significant role. The crazy thing is, now I'm going to stop myself and you here. So I want you to go look at my big graph on the website, the one with all the colors, and it shows sleeping and smoking combined compared to days of depression. And you pause my video so you can take a quick look at it, kind of read it, figure it out. But what I saw, and what I'm assuming you'll see, is that it looks like there's a huge difference between people who smoke every day and also get unrecommended hours of sleep versus people who never smoke and get the recommended hours. I mean, just looking at it, I'd say there's a significant difference. I'd say the people who get recommended sleep and never smoke have way less depression, and that's just visually how I see it. And then, not to mention, as I was speaking before, we saw there is a difference with the p-values of just sleeping and depression and just smoking and depression. So I assume smoking and sleeping on depression would be the same thing, significantly different. But that's the cool thing about stats. We checked it out, and they're actually not different. So we compared people who always smoke and don't get recommended sleep to people who never smoke and get recommended sleep. Turns out, grouped together like that, the p-value is 0.803, which is not significant, meaning there's no difference in depression among those two groups, which is super crazy. Goes against what you'd visually think looking at the graphs, but that's just what it told us. So summing it all up, we found there's a difference of depression significantly between smoking every day, some days never, and then there's also a significant difference in depression when looking at recommended hours of sleep and non-recommended hours of sleep. But when you look at the hours of sleep combined with smoking habits and then depression, there's no difference. The combined variables of smoking and sleeping don't show a significant difference as they vary on depression, which is super crazy. So I guess my big takeaway here, what's so cool about this podcast, why it's fun to listen to, why it's gets so many thumbs up, why people love it. I guess the big takeaway here is that, like the singular things, singular smoking, or just looking at sleeping, it does affect your depression. But combined, there's no real data we can use to support the statement saying that sleeping and smoking have a direct effect on, or a significant effect on depression. So what I'm trying to say is, it looks like there's something there. We haven't found it yet, but we can't claim that combined effect. But we can show how there's singular differences throughout the data. So with that said, kind of the whole point of the research project was to see, like, what do these things do with depression? What does that mean for you? The way I see it is, if you're struggling, which everyone is, it's not your fault. Obviously, it's just a horrible thing. It's tough for everyone. But knowing that sleep and tobacco each have these effects, look at how much you sleep. If you're not getting the recommended hours of sleep, maybe you could try and go out of your way a little bit more. It's hard. You can't do it overnight. You can't just change your sleeping patterns, but work on it over time. Try and get more to that recommended range. See if you start feeling better with mental health-wise. Same with tobacco. It's an addictive substance. A lot of people are caught by it. Not much you can do about it, but if you're struggling with depression and want to work through it, maybe try and see if you can, limit those levels a little and see what you can do. So that's basically the main reason of this project, was to, just see if those variables are related, how they're related, if it's significant, and then, looking at how we can use what we just learned to help ourselves. And then the second part that's cool about this discussion is just the craziness of stats and how wild it is. Because you look at that one colorful graph on my website, and you're like, wow, these two things are super different. Like, there is a crazy difference. Depression varies all over the place when you change these variables. And then you do the real stats to just prove yourself right, and you find out it's not the case. They're not actually different. And so it's cool, it's kind of like, don't judge something just from what you see on first glance. Actually look into it. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. Catch you guys next week. Goodbye.